I still remember the look on my mother's face when she handed me a packed suitcase and told me that my older brother, Leo, needed my bedroom more than I did, completely ignoring the fact that my name is the only one on the mortgage and I've been the one paying every single bill for the last 3 years. She looked me dead in the eye and said that since Leo was getting back on his feet and starting a family, it was only fair that he had the primary suite, while I should be grateful she was letting me crash on the sofa until I found a small apartment. I stood there in the hallway of the home I worked 3 jobs to afford, feeling the absolute weight of betrayal crushing my chest, and I realized in that moment that being the good daughter had finally cost me everything. Was I wrong for what I did next, or would you have burned the bridge too? I really need you to hear the whole story before you judge me, because this wasn't just about a room. It was about 24 years of being second best in a house I literally owned. To understand how we got to the point where my own mother tried to evict me from my own property, you have to understand the dynamic between me, my mom, and my brother Leo. Growing up, Leo was the golden child. There is no other word for it. He was a high school football star, charming, and could talk his way out of a speeding ticket while smiling at the officer. My mother, Sarah, worshipped the ground he walked on. If Leo failed a test, it was the teacher's fault. If Leo broke a window, it was because the bowl was faulty. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, studious one. I was the reliable one. In my mother's eyes, reliability was a given, while Leo's basic existence was a miracle. When it came time for college, my mother took out loans she couldn't afford to send Leo to a private university, where he spent 4 years partying before eventually dropping out. When I graduated high school with honors, she told me she couldn't help me with a single cent, and that I should probably look into community college so I could stay home and help her with the rent. I didn't complain. I worked, I studied, I got my degree in accounting, and I started building a life. Fast forward a few years, and my mother was in a bad spot. The house we had lived in for a decade was being sold by the landlord, and she had 0 savings. She was terrified of being homeless. At the same time, I had been saving every penny, living like a hermit to build up a down payment. I decided to do what I thought was the noble thing. I bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a nice suburb. I told my mom she could live there with me rent-free for the rest of her life. My only condition was that she take care of the basic housework while I worked 60 hours a week to cover the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and the utilities. For 3 years it worked. I was proud of myself. I felt like I had finally earned her respect. I had provided her with security that her golden boy never could. Leo, meanwhile, was living across the country, moving from one failed business venture to another, always asking for loans that he never paid back. My mother would secretly send him money from the small Social Security check she got, and even though I knew, I let it slide because I wanted her to be happy. Then, 2 months ago, everything changed. I came home from a particularly grueling day at the firm to find Leo's car in the driveway. Not just his car, but a U-Haul trailer. I walked inside to find Leo, his pregnant girlfriend, Jasmine, and my mother clinking glasses of lemonade in my kitchen. My mother didn't even say hello. She just beamed and said, "Isn't it wonderful? Leo is moving back home. He's going to raise the baby here where he has family support." I was stunned, but I tried to be the bigger person. I told them they could stay in the guest room for a few weeks while they looked for a place. That's when the tension started. Within a week, the few weeks turned into indefinitely. Leo didn't look for a job. Jasmine complained that the guest room was too small for a nursery. They were eating my food, using my high-speed internet for gaming, and leaving the house a disaster. When I asked Leo to chip in for groceries, my mother jumped down my throat, screaming that I was being greedy, and that Leo was stressed enough as it is. The breaking point happened last Tuesday. I returned from a business trip to find my key didn't work in the front door. I knocked, confused, and Leo opened the door wearing my favorite oversized hoodie. He looked smug. My mother walked up behind him and handed me 2 suitcases and a box of my personal files. She told me that they had decided the master bedroom. My room was the only one suitable for a nursery because it had the attached bathroom. She said that since I was young and single, I didn't need all that space, and it was my responsibility as a sister to support my brother. She actually told me that she had changed the locks for the safety of the baby, and that I could sleep on the couch for a few days while I looked for a studio apartment. She had convinced herself that because she lived there, it was her house, and she had the right to dictate who lived in which room. She had completely erased the fact that I was the owner. I stood on that porch, looking at the house I pay for, the grass I mow, and the roof I just repaired, and I felt a coldness wash over me that I had never felt before. So that is the situation I was in. I was standing on my own porch, locked out of my own home by the people I had supported for years, being told I was no longer welcome in the master suite of the property I bought with my own blood. Sweat and tears. I had to make a choice. Do I tuck my tail and go to a hotel, or do I reclaim what's mine? Before I tell you the absolute nuclear option I chose and how it blew up their entire world, I want you to pause right now. Go down to the comments and tell me honestly, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have called the police right then, or would you have played the long game? I really want to see if I'm the only one who thinks this was pure insanity. Okay, so here is what happened next. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I actually just nodded, took my suitcases and said, okay, if that's how you want to play it. I went straight to a hotel and called my lawyer. I had the deed, the mortgage papers, and every single utility bill in my name. My lawyer told me that since there was no formal lease agreement with my mother or brother, they were essentially guests who had overstayed their welcome. But since my mother had lived there for 3 years, I had to follow formal eviction procedures. However, the locks were a different story. Since I was the owner and the resident, what they did was an illegal lockout. I didn't call the police that night, though. I wanted to make sure they couldn't weasel their way out of this. I waited until the next morning, when I knew Leo and his girlfriend would be out celebrating their new living arrangement at a fancy brunch they definitely couldn't afford. I showed up at the house with a locksmith and a sheriff's deputy. My mother opened the door, her face turning pale when she saw the badge. I didn't say a word. I let the deputy explain that she had no legal right to lock the owner out of the property. The locksmith changed the locks back right then and there. My mother started wailing, calling me a heartless monster, and saying I was killing the baby by causing so much stress. I walked into my master bedroom, and my blood boiled. They had already moved my furniture into the garage. Jasmine's clothes were in my closet. My expensive skincare was in the trash to make room for her cheap lotions. I told my mother she had 30 days to vacate the premises. I served her the formal eviction papers right there in the kitchen. She laughed, thinking I was bluffing. She said, "You wouldn't evict your own mother. Where would I go?" I told her that was something she should have thought about before she treated her only stable child like a tenant in her own home. When Leo and Jasmine got back and realized they couldn't get in, the fireworks really started. Leo started pounding on the door, screaming that he was going to break my face. I just recorded it all from the Ring camera and called the police again. He ended up getting hauled away for disorderly conduct and making terroristic threats. With him in a holding cell, Jasmine went running back to her parents, realizing that the lavish lifestyle Leo promised her was a lie. My mother was left in the house, alone and silent. For the next 30 days, she tried everything. She tried the silent treatment. She tried guilt, tripping me by making only one portion of dinner, and she even tried to get our extended family involved. My phone was blowing up with texts from aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, telling me I was disgraceful for kicking out a poor old woman. I replied to every single one of them with a photo of the mortgage statement and a simple question. If you're so worried about her, which room in your house is she moving into? Strangely enough, they all went silent after that. The 30 days ended yesterday. I hired professional movers to pack up my mother's things and move them into a small, clean one-bedroom apartment I had paid for 2 months. It was more than she deserved, but I wanted to be able to sleep at night knowing she wasn't on the street. I handed her the keys and told her that our relationship was over. I told her that I was selling the big house because it held too many memories of being used and unloved. I'm moving to a different city, starting a new job, and for the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. Leo is still trying to find someone to pay his bail, and Jasmine has blocked him on everything. My mother is currently sitting in her new apartment, probably calling anyone who will listen to tell them how cruel her daughter is. But when I walked back into my empty, quiet house last night, I didn't feel like a monster. I felt free. I realized that family isn't about blood, it's about respect. If you don't respect the person providing the roof over your head, you don't get to live under it. This whole experience taught me that setting boundaries isn't mean, it's necessary for survival. I spent my whole life trying to buy my mother's love, only to realize she was never going to give it to me because she didn't value me. She only valued what I could do for her and her favorite son. Moving forward, I'm surrounding myself with people who appreciate me for who I am, not for the size of my bank account or the house I can provide. It was a painful lesson, but I'm glad I learned it now rather than 20 years down the line. If you've ever been the reliable one in your family, please take this as a sign to protect yourself. People will take as much as you are willing to give, and they will never, ever stop until you say no. Like this video if you think I did the right thing by standing my ground and evicting them. Make sure to subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries and dealing with entitled family members, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I go too far with the eviction, or did they get exactly what they deserved? I'll see you all in the next story.